Welcome to Cineights, where you get to know the best movies and series. Today's video is about top 20 best Al Pacino performance of all time. I hope you enjoy this video. Be sure to watch until the end because I am sure you will like it. Please subscribe to the channel and like the video. In Justice for All, 1979, standing is one of the best legal dramas of the 1970s, and Justice for All is a little underrated and easily worth watching for fans of the genre and/or Pacino. He stars as a defense lawyer working in Baltimore who finds himself in over his head with his latest matter, as it involves defending a guilty judge alongside other innocent defenders. Things unfold in a gradual yet tense way, with Pacino's character being gradually pushed to breaking point as the film progresses. It's surprisingly engaging for a movie predominantly made up of people just talking, and for as solid as all the technical and writing-related aspects are, it's really Pacino who makes Justice for All go from a decent film to a very good one. Cruising, 1980. Cruising caused a stir upon release and is still a movie that gets debated to this day, regarding whether it feels like it crosses boundaries and offends, or is effective in properly condemning certain homophobic attitudes. Its provocative and uncompromising nature means it won't be for everyone, and this approach to filmmaking was often used by the late William Friedkin, who always seemed willing to disrupt the status quo. Pacino's certainly dedicated to the film's challenging lead performance, with his involvement in Friedkin's sensibilities making Cruising a memorable film that's worth a watch for viewers who feel up to watching something admittedly divisive and dark. The Godfather Part 3, 1990. Even if it wasn't as good as the movies that were released before The Godfather, Part 3 does get a little too much criticism and is a solid enough finale to make the overall Godfather trilogy remain a great one. The plot follows a much older Michael Corleone and sees him trying to legitimize the family business while seeking redemption for his past misdeeds. It's an uneven movie, with certain sequences proving far more effective than others, but it undeniably has an explosive and dramatic final act that concludes the epic crime saga on a high note. And Al Pacino is as fantastic as always as the tragic figure that is Michael Corleone, being 100% dedicated to the role here, even if the material he's given to work with isn't quite as strong as it was in the two other movies. Carlito's Way, 1993. The second crime movie collaboration between Al Pacino and director Brian De Palma, Carlito's Way is more subdued than the Miami set crime epic they made exactly 10 years prior. It follows a newly released prisoner who wants to put his life of crime behind him, only to find various forces from his past are making that easier said than done. It's a grounded and compelling look at redemption and the inescapable nature of a life of crime, and though it's sometimes a little slow, it works and does inevitably build to a strong climax. It's one of the better Pacino movies released during the 1990s, and certainly worth watching for anyone who's let it slip under their radar. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, 2019. Though Al Pacino's role in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is fairly small, it's still a great movie the legendary actor happens to feature in. And given Quentin Tarantino plans to retire soon, it's good that these two prominent figures within the American film industry got to work together at least once. He plays the agent of Leonardo DiCaprio's character, Rick Dalton, who's experiencing a rough patch in his acting career and is desperate to reclaim his former glory as a star. Pacino's scenes are fun, and the movie as a whole is a wonderful depiction of Hollywood at the end of the 1960s, sticking fairly close to the reality of life back then for much of the movie until the memorable final half-hour turns into something of a fairy tale. The Panic in Needle Park, 1971. Movies dealing with the topic of addiction are always difficult watches, and one would assume they're also difficult films to act in. That makes the fact that Al Pacino's first starring role was in The Panic in Needle Park even more remarkable, as this very grounded and realistic movie is all about the struggle of a young couple living in New York City who are both heroin addicts. Pacino demonstrates that right from the start of his career, he was an acting force to be reckoned with, and his co-star, Kitty Wynn, gives a similarly strong performance. The Panic in Needle Park is a harrowing movie to experience, holding up as an intense look at severe addiction and having lost very little of its power in the 50-plus years since its release. The Devil's Advocate, 1997. Al Pacino is as captivating in subdued roles as he is in the more over-the-top roles he's taken on, but it tends to be the movies in the latter category that are most famous. And few movies feature as explosive an Al Pacino performance as The Devil's Advocate does, because here, Pacino gets to play a truly menacing and evil antagonist and is clearly having a blast doing so. He's the boss of a prestigious New York City law firm, and it's Keanu Reeves' character, a new member of the firm, who learns firsthand just what his new boss is capable of. It's a somewhat ridiculous film at times, but it also seems pretty self-aware about it, and it does ultimately result in a very entertaining movie that blends supernatural horror and law-related drama to great effect. Scent of a Woman, 1992. Believe it or not, Al Pacino has only won a single Oscar in his lengthy and accomplished acting career, with an additional 8 nominations received between the years 1972 and 2019. That single Oscar win was for his performance in Scent of a Woman, a movie where he plays a retired U.S. Army officer who also happens to be blind. The movie revolves around the unlikely bond that forms between him and a college student played by Chris O'Donnell, who takes on a temporary job as a caregiver personal assistant. A fairly predictable and sappy movie at times, but it's undeniably watchable and well acted, and worth watching for the fact that it's Pacino's sole Oscar win alone. Serpico, 1973. Al Pacino starred in a streak of absolutely iconic films throughout the 1970s, and Serpico is undeniably one of them. It tells the real-life story of Frank Serpico, a New York City cop who became famous for the way he stood up to rampant corruption in his line of work, even though doing so put him in immense physical danger. Like he just about always does, Pacino completely disappears into the role, which, along with the grounded filmmaking, makes Serpico feel remarkably realistic. It marked the first time Pacino received a nomination for Best Lead Actor, and continues to stand to this day as one of the grittiest and most compelling crime-drama movies of its decade. Angels in America, 2003. It might be considered cheating to include Angels in America among Al Pacino's best movies, since it's more of a miniseries than it is a traditional film. It runs for close to 6 hours and is split into 6 episodes, though the presentation is overall remarkably cinematic, giving it the feel of a movie that just so happens to be 3 times longer than most movies. It's also one of the finest things filmmaker Mike Nichols ever made, and tells a compelling story revolving around numerous characters whose lives are all impacted by the AIDS epidemic of the 1980s. Pacino shines in one of the lead roles, as do the various other people in the miniseries. Remarkable cast, including Meryl Streep, Jeffrey Wright, and Emma Thompson. Donnie Brasco, 1997. Al Pacino excels in just about any genre, but it's fair to say that the actor's most at home when he's starring in something crime-related. He's one of the best of all time when it comes to portraying gangsters or criminals in general, which he gets to do in Donnie Brasco, playing a member of the mob. He befriends an undercover FBI agent played by Johnny Depp, with the drama of the film revolving around how this agent becomes conflicted over what to do after he takes a liking to the mob lifestyle. It's an entertaining and very well-made movie, being fairly easy to get absorbed in while also carrying additional interest for the fact that it's based on a true story. Insomnia, 2002. Insomnia is one of Christopher Nolan's less overwhelming and/or confusing movies, but remains tremendously exciting, even without much by way of time manipulation or anything sci-fi, superhero-related. It is an intensely psychological thriller, though, revolving around 2 detectives sent to investigate a murder in a small town. Al Pacino plays one of the detectives, and his character finds himself under increasing pressure thanks to an inability to sleep, which understandably makes the task at hand even more difficult. It's a surprisingly great movie, and also contains one of the very best dramatic performances Robin Williams ever gave, with the distinctly chilly look of the film, owing to its setting, also making it stick in one's mind long after it's over. Glengarry Glen Ross's 1992, arguably standing as one of the best-written movies of the 1990s. Glengarry Glen Ross is essentially a movie about men yelling at each other for almost 2 hours, but in a way that's riveting. It's about an intense competition that kicks off between various real estate salesmen, as they're told near the start of the film that all but 2 will be fired by the week's end. It's a movie with an ensemble cast, and that means Al Pacino doesn't stand out quite as much as usual, instead fitting in well with a dynamic range of actors who are each firing on all cylinders. It's one of the most compelling dialogue-heavy movies of the past few decades and is incredibly stressful for just about the entire runtime in the best way possible. The Insider, 1999. Michael Mann's best known for his action crime movies, but The Insider is a more subdued film from the director that still manages to be utterly engrossing and exciting. It's based on a true story and revolves around a 60 Minutes report that exposed some dramatic behind-the-scenes secrets within the tobacco industry in America. It might sound a little dry on paper, and its premise plus the fact that it clocks in at a lengthy 158 minutes might make it sound a little intimidating to watch. However, it's without a doubt worth giving a shot, as it ends up being remarkably captivating, benefiting from great pacing, strong direction, and impressive acting from the likes of The Irishman, 2019. It might be a little slower and bleaker than something like Goodfellas or The Departed, but The Irishman can still be included among the greatest crime movies directed by Martin Scorsese. It tells the story of a hitman named Frank Sheeran, and focuses in particular on his involvement with the disappearance of union leader Jimmy Hoffa. Al Pacino plays Hoffa here with a fiery dedication and earned his most recent Oscar nomination for the role. He's a key reason why the film ends up having such a tremendous emotional impact, with his portrayal of Hoffa being instrumental in making the tragic nature of the story, particularly regarding the way it ends, hit as hard as possible. Heat, 1995. Speaking of De Niro and Pacino, the two also starred in the iconic crime action epic Heat, released in 1995. This is a movie that shows filmmaker Michael Mann at his best, with the ambitious story revolving around an expert thief and an aggressive detective clashing, all the while the former is planning a highly ambitious heist. The action might not be frequent, but when it hits, you feel every single second in the most intense manner possible, with a heist shootout sequence for the ages. Similarly compelling is the diner scene, where the 2 main characters simply talk to each other, with it being just as dramatic and tense as any of the more explosive, action-packed sections of the movie. Dog Day Afternoon, 1975. Not many movies about bank robbing could top Heat, but Dog Day Afternoon is perhaps the rare movie revolving around such an act that might be even better. Here, Al Pacino plays a man on the other side of the law, with the premise involving a bank robbery hostage situation going dramatically wrong, leading to a tense standoff between robbers and police for just about the entire movie. It might sound like a bold claim, but Dog Day Afternoon really is one of the very best crime movies of all time. It's intensely personal, gripping, entertaining, and tragic, all in equal measure, and for as good as 1973's Serpico was as a collaboration between Pacino and director Sidney Lumet, this 1975 film was even better. The Godfather Part 2, 1974. Undoubtedly one of the greatest sequels in cinema history, The Godfather Part 2 earns its reputation as a legendary crime epic. Like the aforementioned The Irishman and Heat, this film also stars Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, though here, they're separated by decades, with Pacino's scenes playing out after the events of the first film, and De Niro's scenes being a series of extended flashbacks where he plays a younger version of the character Marlon Brando played in the first movie. That makes The Godfather Part 2 technically both a sequel and something of a prequel, but however you want to define it, it's a classic. Scarface, 1983. Scarface screams 1980s, but in an inevitably charming way that ensures it stands as one of the best movies of the decade in question. It's an unabashedly straightforward approach to a rise and fall gangster story, following Tony Montana as he comes from nothing, works his way into becoming a powerful gangster, and then loses it all thanks to his hubris and other personal flaws. It was the first movie Brian De Palma and Pacino did together, and is much more excessive and over the top than their 1993 film Carlito's Way. But it's this unrelenting dedication to excess and ridiculousness that gives Scarface its unforgettable nature, with it being a defining 1980s movie and one of the very best gangster movies of all time, with Pacino's The Godfather, 1972. Not only is the original movie in the Godfather trilogy one of the best crime movies of all time, but it's also perhaps the greatest family drama in cinema history. It introduces the Corleone family in stunning fashion, being about an aging patriarch doing all he can to take care of the business side of his family and its crime empire, as well as looking after his various relatives. Though it was released after The Panic in Needle Park, The Godfather would have been the first movie many people saw Pacino in, and it's still one of his very best performances. The key supporting character who becomes the head of the family by the film's end, and though it's one of his oldest movies, some of the scenes in here still showcase his acting at its best.